Welcome to Worldbuild with us, the podcast where we create fantastical worlds with help from you, our listeners. My name is Rob Hilferty. I'm here with another packed house with my co-host Daniel Quinn, Courtney Staples, and Christopher Prunty. On today's episode, we finish up our foray into the black metal world of the Land of 1,000 Decibels. Now, last week we ended on a bit of a cliffhanger with the twist, and that twist was it's all clones. So, what do we have to reconcile that twist on this episode?
Based on that twist, I was thinking back to the Oblivion Angel idea that we had come up with, and what if it's not actually acting out of some sort of evil nature? It's actually trying to purify the earth by capturing those clone souls. Like it wants to limit maybe even the damage that is being done to the space-time continuum by having all these clones all over the place. So it's trying to rein in that chaos, if you will.
Interesting. So this is like a law keeper type
Right,
deal.
yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
So can you explain that more to me? So is the angel creating clones in some way?
No, so there's something I imagine that Satan is probably the one creating the clones when he resets the timeline essentially.
So who are the clones?
Wait, hadn't we talked about this a little bit last time where Chris brought up something about repeating timelines?
Oh, okay. So you
Yeah.
mean when the realm is reset, that the clones are really the people from the past, but just restored. Okay.
Yeah, they get reset basically. And something about that is something about that cycle of infinite cloning is potentially damaging the universe itself.
So the angel is trying to permanently eliminate certain souls, certain songs really from the world.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's trying to capture them so that it limits the amount of damage that's being done.
That's interesting because that would mean too that we had talked about using music to bring yourself back through the story of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
That would mean that that's the antithesis of whatever this angel is trying to accomplish.
Oh yeah, those resurrection songs, basically. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting that you bring up the resurrection thing because my faction that I've brought today is bucks the cycle of resurrection. And I wanted to bring in this aspect that I was thinking because I was like, man, it's really cool and part of metal, I think, are necromancers. And I wanted to have this set of Necromancer Kings that are essentially heroes that tried to topple Satan and have failed. And instead of being destroyed, they're essentially soul oblivioned, they're obliterated from existence, but they still cling to their undead life. And they are trying to, and because they can't be resurrected, their soul has been scoured from their body, but their sense of purpose is still there. And so now all they do is try and hunt down souls to try and resurrect themselves in some way. And I wanted to present these things not as ghouls or as, weak kind of zombie things, but incredibly powerful, incredibly dangerous beings that are just, they could rule empires in this land if they chose, that type of thing.
That's really cool. So, kind of like Lich Kings.
Yes, essentially Lich Kings, but a little bit different. And I wanted them to have enough personality where they could be, heroic or completely tyrannical, depending on the Lich King,
So are they they're existing on a borrowed song, basically, because their song has been destroyed?
Yes, something like that. And actually, if we're talking about the recurring cycle of the apocalypse, I want them to exist outside of that cycle. So they are a persistent force from apocalypse to apocalypse.
Okay.
Given enough time, so you have to hunt them down and kill them, otherwise there will be so many of them after a certain amount of time that it's just nothing but Lich Kings, and so Satan has to force these people to go and murder the Lich King every now and again.
Ooh,
But
do they persist because they have a means of surviving the apocalypse by being in a phylactery of some kind?
sure. I mean, I didn't really think beyond the idea that they're liches, but again, they're Necromancer Kings. I want to make
like
sure
a
that
musical
it's distinct.
instrument that gets preserved, and then a band takes up the instrument, and that's how they kind of get in trouble.
Okay, fucking Daniel.
Like
yes,
an
that is the perfect
intelligent
idea.
guitar.
Like a
I like that.
guitar. Yeah.
It's a phylactery. No, the instruments are the phylacteries. Yes, of course.
Yes.
I love
Okay.
that.
So if that's the case, it's like we're kind of merging this idea of the phylactery, there's in Pathfinder and in other, RPGs, there's like the Death Knight, right?
Mhm.
Where you put on the armor of this undead knight, and then eventually it takes over. I imagine the phylactery is kind of similar.
That's what I
Mhm.
like. And
Yeah.
then maybe that's how they kind of like persist, as they literally live on through other artists who they then waste over time
Yeah.
with their
Mhm.
wicked spirits.
Yeah, it's a withering. Yes, absolutely.
Hmm.
And
like-
again, they have to continue to consume souls, because the way that their body works is that it's like it's constantly burning through soul energy. So it's got to like eat continuously, and that's what keeps it going.
Oh, I have a question for you. Does that mean that they even need physical embodiment? Because like if they are really a phylactery, like a guitar, and it moves from like musician to musician and it rots them, the musician kind of ends up, wasted, just like if he'd been partying on heroin for years. And then like when he ultimately dies, and it absorbs it's rotted, burnt out his song, and then a new musician finds the guitar.
I mean, I want to keep it to a physical form, just because I think it's more interesting. I'm always a bigger fan of corporeal undead than I am incorporeal undead.
Yeah, they're just going from station to station, really.
Is that a Bowie reference?
I was going for that, yes.
Nice. Well, to be fair, if Bowie were in this world, he'd be one of the most powerful magicians in there. So that's, got to be part of it.
But, he would actually be a fractured personality that's over several different life forms.
Oh, of course. There'd be the Thin White Duke. There'd be Ziggy Stardust. There'd be Lazarus. I mean, we have so many different options. And I know David Bowie's not heavy metal, but fuck it, man. It's David Bowie. You gonna fucking argue with me about that shit? Get the fuck out of here. Come on. Come on. Yeah. So yeah, I wanted to bring some necromancers. And of course, they raise the dead. That's the other cool thing. So I was kind of imagining that after one of their performances where, people are sacrificed and people die and everything like that, the difference is, instead of, like the corpse taker is coming and taking the corpses away, it's like, no, he raises them. And then guess what? That's the next mosh pit, like that's the next one. Yeah.
Messed up.
So who's got another faction that they want to talk about, as long as we're getting off necromancers?
Mine was like kind of similar in the same vein, sort of. Related to people sort of lasting across rebirths of the world. I was thinking like if a group somehow figured out how to survive, or maybe they even had an encounter with the Oblivion Angel and either took some knowledge from it or maybe had their souls partially consumed, but because of that they were able to persist much longer than they should be able to. So they keep their memories across the worlds, but because of their nature, they have to remain hidden, and probably very hidden from these Lich Kings that you brought up.
I like the idea that we might have some kind of a secret war going on between the two.
Yeah.
But let's talk about that a little bit more. I want to know, like, so what makes them special? What makes them interesting? Like, what's the difference between like a random coward who just so happens to live through the apocalypse and the people that you're talking about here?
Sure. I imagine that they retain so much knowledge and so much music across generations. Maybe they're the ones who are actively studying Satan's song, because they can retain their memories of how much they've learned about it from previous iterations.
So these are like sages, basically, right?
Right, yeah, yeah.
All right. Can we even go a little bit further and be like, not only are they sages, but they are like the keepers of the words or keepers of the
Mm,
song?
yeah, definitely.
Because now
Now
we can give them and now we can give them a little bit more religious importance. And if there's a secret war between the Lich Kings and the sages, then we can, I mean, now there's a shadow war going on, and the sages are still trying to find the apocalypse world and all that good stuff.
right, yeah. No, I like that a lot.
The faction that I had in mind is ironically also centered around death, or rather undead. I wanted to call it the 100 Dead Men. And the idea that I had for them was there is one burial site that they kind of guard against, and it is this ancient evil that is constantly trying to break out. And the song that they're playing is that is the drum slash bass line to the song, is it banging against its cage.
Mm,
I like that. I like
Yeah.
that
yeah,
so far.
same.
Okay.
The reason that they're called the 100 Dead Men is because
There's 100 of them and they're dead.
no. Each one of them sees themselves as like giving up their life to trying to pursue getting good enough to defeat the beast, but no one has come to that point yet. So while there's 100 of them that are seen as like the higher echelons, there are aspirants that are constantly trying to duel them for how we talked about how there would be like the duel of song where your soul would be put on the line.
Mm-hmm.
So imagine generations of this where you constantly have to fight those below you, and your position can always be taken up until eventually they believe that they've amassed enough power to take on the beast.
Gotcha. And there's no like definitive form or substance to this beast, right? So it could be purely metaphorical.
So I was going for, in order to incorporate the twist, that it is actually one of the 100 dead men. It is their ancient general that just got obsessed with power, and so they are actually trying to defeat themselves.
Okay.
Oh,
I
interesting.
like the reconciliation of the twist as well. I can definitely go with that. All right.
Were they like a band?
They are a band of brothers. Yes.
100 people in a band, that's like Slipknot levels of band
Yeah.
members.
It's a
Is it
battle
like-
of the bands.
It's like a Philharmonic Orchestra, but metal.
Ooh.
Oh, wait. We can do something with that because you can have like, what's that called? It's like a choir of like Norwegian throat singers and stuff
Yeah,
like that.
yeah.
Yeah.
You mean Tuvan throat singers? I guess there's probably Norwegian ones.
No, there's Norwegian. Yeah, there's a
Mm.
Norwegian. In particular, I'm thinking of a Swedish one from the Killer Instinct soundtrack, actually, because
Wow.
Excellent.
they have like a men's choir of like basically like Viking dudes, and then they're also playing an instrument that's made out of human bones.
I
So-
hope that's the group that was constructed out for Skyrim, because that's a missed opportunity.
It could be. The same guy who does the music for Killer Instinct also does the music for Doom and Doom Eternal. And
Yeah.
the music in all of those games is just so fucking on point.
So good.
good.
I
Yeah.
think BFG Division actually did have the acoustics like run through a human skull.
I mean, that sounds right. I'm not going to dispute that. That sounds correct to me.
That's
And
pretty
also-
metal, I think.
I forget the waveform or whatever it's called when you look up the way that like sound would look in some sort of spectrograph or something, but it makes out a pentacle.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
cool.
they
Mm.
just went several levels for fucking metal.
So, okay, this tangent might sound like it's nonsense, and it is, but I think that what we can glean from this is that there is also a mountain that is also the skull of a giant that you play music out of. It's basically like an amphitheater, but fucking metal. So it's Skull Mountain, giant skull, and it's just a better acoustics for it's like a battleground theater.
Yes.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yes.
Now, would it be
Yes.
its mouth, or would it be like sawed into the back of its skull? I'm picturing mouth.
It's got to be mouth.
Yeah,
It's
I'm picturing
100% got to be mouth. Yeah. So Daniel, what is your faction? Tell us all about it.
I feel like the faction I was thinking about was similar to one that Courtney had brought up. I was wondering where in the universe of these metal people producers fit. So I thought maybe there's this like ancient cult slash order of these golem like oracles who they embed or write songs on themselves, and so they've kind of absorbed or kept songs. They keep the songs of history on their bodies, but they're not like alive. They're like some kind of golem like creatures, and the bands consult them for like higher wisdom. So they get songs from them, and they also exchange songs with them. So they give them songs, and then they embed them on their bodies so they can take new riffs to create new songs. And the twist with them is that some of them aren't good. Like some of them actually feed off of these bands, and that some of them are working together to control like the direction of the development of music. So I'm thinking of like, like in Buffy, there's the Grigori, I forget what they're called, what they actually call them. The Watchers is what they call them, Buffy. But so that kind of like that, but there's evil Watchers and there's good Watchers, and these like producer golem types are meant to help bands develop, but they also work against them because they want to control music.
So two things. One, these are jukebox golems, is what I'm hearing.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, like that's essentially what they are. But secondly, actually, Daniel, I think that what we can probably do is give them cohorts in the form of like managers, like band managers, essentially, or agents. So they can either help or harm bands organize.
That's what I picture.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So you can tie those two together. So it's like, hey, I get 10% of your cut.
Right.
And they can either be evil or good, depending on, just
that's
like
exactly
the
what they
industry.
are. Yeah.
Although realistically, in the real music industry, it's mostly evil. But
Yeah.
So do these jukebox golems have stars in their eyes?
See, I'm glad that you said that, because I was like, oh man, I hope someone brings up a Cheap Trick reference. Or is it Cheap Trick or is it Foreigner? I can never get
Foreigner, I
those
believe.
God damn it.
I remember from Aqua Teen Hunger Force, the Foreigner belt.
Yeah, well, they also have the Cheap Trick thing, which is like they're the two competing like belts, right? Isn't that what happens?
I think that's the next belt that fights them. I think you're right.
Yeah, and I think that there's a reason. It's because they sound so fucking similar, like the two of them together. Again, this is an episode of tangents, and I apologize for that. Someone bring us back to the jukebox golems.
Speaking of conflict, oh, damn it!
No, because we want to sit and marinate with Daniel's point a little bit more. Courtney, you have something to say about Daniel's point. Go ahead.
When you were describing golems that are like sort of built out of music, obviously went in like the jukebox route, but I was also picturing ones that are like crafted out of instruments. Like they've basically taken instruments of past generations or what have you, and like crafted them onto their own bodies, so they're kind of expanding over time with physical embodiments of music.
That's amazing. You could be like Big Band. You could be like Big Band from Skullgirls. What's also kind of interesting here is I like the idea of certain like managers and like producers essentially giving like a devil's bargain. So it's like, we'll give you the rights and we'll give you this legendary weapon, but we own, whatever portion of souls and faces you shred off, stuff like that. And then of course you've got to have like a literal devil's bargain, Charlie Daniels Band style.
And the other thing too I wanted to emphasize is that like they're obviously attached to individual bands, but like the bad ones are also collaborating because they're gathering the songs and they plan to like control the future of music that way.
So I'm actually kind of curious as to what nefarious means. Like, what's their eventual goal? Is it to overthrow Satan, or is it something
Ooh,
else?
I like that.
To
Maybe
instill
they
Satan as
maybe
their CEO.
well, maybe if Satan represents a kind of disorder and a kind of chaos, and then maybe they represent a kind of order in that sense.
Oh yeah. So they want to
Lawful
like
evil.
Yeah,
right. They want to like bring order into a world that isn't meant to have it.
and be more powerful than Satan.
They just want to make it so corporate, man.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So that's a good angle that we can take with it as well. It's like this represents like the corporatocracy within the music, where
Yeah.
they take the soul and they process it, but in a way that is well, no, they just take your soul and try and give you something in return. So yeah, we can make
Yeah.
that work.
Mhm.
And because everything's literal in this world, like when they take your part of your soul, they literally take part of your soul.
Yeah, that's what they're doing. Like then they're betting it on them, and they give you a piece of someone else's soul.
Oh, they're
Mhm.
soul depositories. They're soul banks,
Yeah.
basically.
Yep. Yep.
Okay. Yeah.
What happens?
Although,
What happens if you like kill one of them? What
Ooh.
happens to all the souls
Uh,
inside?
To take from what happens in a different mythology, if you kill like a crossroads demon, another one just takes its place, and it has the same backing of like the soul bargain that was made.
but what about
Oh,
the souls within that entity?
Think of it like a will. They will those souls to the next in line.
Yeah, I feel
That's-
like there needs to be a way
Mm.
that, whether it's that or something else, that prevents them from being easily hunted and killed, because then people will just hunt them down and kill them and take what's in them.
right.
There must be
Yeah.
something that makes that difficult to do.
Well, this makes it fruitless. Like all you're
Right.
doing is creating like, oh great, I
A more
tried
powerful
s-
one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Mm.
see, I find that to be unsatisfying. I'd rather them be like giant loot boxes, like they're targets, but because they're surrounded by industry flunkies and they've created like this kind of society around them, they feel and present themselves as untouchable. And because they're so ancient and powerful, they are in part, but they could still be felled in some way.
There is a way that you can get around it and not being pointless. You can find out who their next of kin or whoever they would bequeath their power to, and just get on their good side and be like, hey man, I'm going to kill the guy above you and you're going to get so much shit, but I'm going to get this stuff.
Right, but you're still substantiating that same pattern. I want there to be a way that you can shatter this pattern in some way. I want to be able to break the wheel.
In
Hmm.
either case, though, what's the consequence, though? So, like, if a bunch of bands get together and kill one of them, what I would like is, sure, they can do that, but there's a huge consequence to doing that, and that's why people don't do it.
So I like the idea that these amalgamation of hero souls within these things coalesce into actual living beings, whether they be human or extra human or something else entirely. I think the idea that these things they're soul depositories. They hold a bunch of pieces of souls together, and then when they die, they fuse into a singular being or multiple singular beings that are bits and pieces from multiple, heroes and musicians.
So it would make more. So if one of them is slain, it would make more, like versions of them, essentially.
Not versions of them, because these things, like, I like the alienness that you've brought to them, Daniel, where they're like constructs, and the reason that they can exist and can kind of wheel and deal in souls is because they're not physiological, they're not human, right? So they're just a container for these things. Whereas the things that come out of them when they're destroyed are very much like human, they're like meat and bone, but there's something different about them. And like
Okay.
maybe they're like just
Are they
super
warped?
powerful paragons or something like that, because again they're all hero souls. Or maybe they're just grotesque like mongrel people,
Yeah, like what I think would be good if whatever comes out of them they're like shades of the thing that they were originally, because they're
Okay.
fragments of a soul. So maybe like slaying one of them isn't a great idea, because then you create all of these kind of shades that
Mhm.
now seek
Mhm.
the rest of their song at any cost, and so they're like dangerous.
I like that idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Agreed. This is making me think of the what are they called? The reanimated people in Rosewater, by Tade
Oh yeah.
Thompson, where
Mhm.
it's like it's just kind of zombies, but like they aren't all like out to eat people. It really depends on what the person was like in their actual life. Some of them get violent, some just sort of stand in front of a doorway, like
Mhm.
waiting to be let in.
Oh, so they have like
Um,
sentience.
mm,
But it's a false sentience. It's not full
Right.
sentience.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
They're
I
like
like
a
that.
broken record.
They're a broken record. Oh my
Oh,
Nice.
that actually wasn't on purpose that time.
That was
Yeah.
good though.
You
Wow.
know that totally works. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's absolutely fine.
I was also
Um,
thinking to tie it back in with the Oblivion Angel, since that seeks out souls to capture. What if like releasing all of these souls at once kind of acts as a beacon for it?
oh
So
yeah.
Oh.
once you kill one of these golems, like you better get the fuck away because that angel is gonna like descend
Oh,
very
because it
quickly.
wants to create silence.
Yeah. hmm
Mm,
And it detects
okay.
all these souls out there at once.
Yeah, soul
Ah,
fragments. Yeah.
that makes
Okay.
hmm
sense.
Yeah. So that is absolutely something that we can do for sure. Oh man, that's fun. Okay. Cool. So I think that wraps it up for our factions. I think we're going to move now. We're moving on to our conflicts, which are just thematic or physical conflicts within the setting. And Daniel, why don't you go ahead and start us off this time?
The conflict I had is 3 words, because I feel like there's plenty we could do with it, and that is dueling bands rivalry. And
Mm.
Okay. Okay.
the idea is there, in any classic, like, I don't know, like a band movie, there's the PC band, the band that is part of the party, your heroes you're following, and then there's their rival band that is just either slightly better than them or has an edge in some way, and they're out to get them. And so I feel like this could be something that's done at a per adventure or per story level, where you're, whatever your individual goals are as a party, you're always being thwarted and accosted by this other band. And so maybe endemic to this world is there are lots of rivalries between bands for whatever reason, because I guess they're all in pursuit of the song that ends the world.
hmm
Okay, this sounds really cool, and I love the idea of codifying a rivalry. Where it's like depending on the echelon that you're standing at, or maybe it's like maybe it's almost like you're putting a wanted poster up with your band on it.
Yeah.
Where it's like the more fame you get, the more rivals you attract, that kind of thing.
Oh yeah, more people start hating you.
Yeah, and not only that, but it's like bigger bands will be like, we got to make sure that we put the boot on their neck first before they topple us. And
Right.
then on the flip side, it's like, you think you're so great, we're coming for you, man. Like
Mhm.
you could go either way with it, and then yeah, that sounds really fun. And I mean, I feel like if we were doing this like in a mechanical RPG sense, a rival system
Yeah.
I feel like you could totally do something like that. That's like
hmm
like the DM could basically play a mini game off screen or off table, and then so it's like, oh shit. Since the last time we met, Rat Skull Mountain, they have gained a new drummer and a sentient flame guitar. Oh man,
Oh
we got to
my
be
God.
careful about them.
Excellent.
Like stuff like that. I think that'd be really cool or an interesting idea for sure.
Especially if they're like antipodes of you in some way, of your band.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, mechanically too, it could be a fun thing to have like two campaigns running at the same time coinciding where each party is the other's rival and eventually you have them like meet
I
in
was
battle.
thinking something like that, or
Mm.
have the player characters make the rival for
Mm.
the character they're playing, because I think that'd be really fun. And
Yeah,
be
that would
like,
be.
and because like the DM has some level of control over it, right? You'd create the character, give it to the DM, and then the DM would then have their own adventures off to the side with those
Mm.
Oh, like
characters that you
like
made.
faction play is what you're thinking of.
Yeah, exactly. From Stars Without Number, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right, so that inter band conflict is certainly badass as hell. Uh, does anyone have a good segue into another conflict that they have?
So mine is actually kind of similar in terms of battling bands. Last time we had talked about like hunting monsters to imbue instruments with awesome powers and stuff. And so I was thinking that there could be a conflict around that, like hunting certain creatures, certain monsters in the world, and kind of like the glory that it would bring to you and your band, but also have the risk of like over hunting monsters and
Mm.
creating like a monsterless wasteland, which is very not metal and sort of defeats the whole purpose.
So when you say wasteland, that sounds like really cool and metal to me. So what we have to be careful of is instead of accidentally creating a monsterless wasteland,
Mhm.
it's a monsterless paradise where
Yep.
like green grass grows. And
Yes.
like maybe they treat that as corruption of some kind.
Yeah, totally. Like you kill the monsters and then like all of a sudden the like bunny rabbits are coming back in and
Yes.
flowers are starting to yeah.
Gross.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like
There's nothing to like putrefy the landscape. And so, the seeping corruption that is easy listening starts to come in, and everyone's like, oh, dear God, no.
yep. I love it.
Yeah, that's great.
Is it accompanied by a musical corruption? So like, is it the sound of the wild that's just like the opposite of the kind of music in this world?
I think the idea of like being in that area immediately turns the volume down and like starts to mellow out some of the harsher chords. I
Yeah.
think something like that is absolutely what happens. So you try and like bang out this sick ass riff, right? But it comes out as like an acoustic guitar that's
Harp
like,
as a harpsichord or a what's it? No, it's a harp.
yeah, or instead of like drums, it's like, why does it sound like I'm playing the fucking xylophone?
Yeah.
Like something like that.
It's worse than silence.
Exactly.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
I don't know about worse than silence, because I imagine that even bad noise is still noise. Whereas with the Oblivion Angel, when there's silence, that's like truly terrifying.
It's like Annihilation, where it's corrupt. It's not only not only is it wiping you out with silence, but it's corrupting you.
Yes,
Yep.
exactly right.
I could see it too as like Annihilation. If you spend too long in there, you start to like actually like your soul actually starts to change, and you start to like sound like Michael Bolton or Enya or something permanently. And in order to like undo that, you have to go do some like crazy badass metal thing elsewhere.
Okay, this is not my first time defending Enya on this podcast.
No. I'm totally fine with Enya. I'm just saying that she is very
And
different
is the
from
opposite
metal.
for this world. Yeah.
Yes.
Why couldn't we go with like a Kenny G or something like that?
Okay, yeah.
I at least don't respect Kenny G. I like Michael Bolton and I like Enya, but I will not abide by Kenny G. Goddamn it.
Okay. We can refer to him.
All right, so we've got this anti-corruption, which is actually we've got anti-corruption going on in the form of easy listening with monsterless landscapes. I love that idea. That's certainly on par with what we're talking about here. Chris, what do we have for you?
I had two kind of nebulous ideas, so I don't know which one to bring up, but the one that Courtney had actually said is a little bit similar to the one that I was going to have be the Annihilation New Wave, and that seems a little bit too similar. The other one that I was going to do is, I believe that a lot of metal and rock and everything, people usually like to put what influenced them, the references that they took from, and there is a legacy that people seem to talk of. So I wanted this group that goes around and kind of grave robs and steals people's possessions, people's music and souls.
Oh, that's interesting. So it's like stolen honor, basically, right? Or they're like
Correct.
vultures. Yeah.
What do they like?
The idea was mainly when I was looking up the description of grunge.
Are they copycats, or are they like? Are they?
Daniel,
Oh, are they?
Daniel,
Oh my god!
Lip syncers.
What's that?
Lip syncers.
No,
Yeah, like
no. I was
or
picturing
cover
something.
bands.
See,
Cover
see,
bands.
God.
Yes.
okay, that's actually where I was going with my conflict. So
Oh,
yeah, we can
Oh.
we can either transition now, Chris, or you can continue to explain your idea. It's up to you.
I was mainly picturing it being something like Bizarro Superman, only for the rock genre. But if you're thinking something like lip singing, that could be that. But that sounds similar to what you might want to do.
Well, no, my conflict was that of the genuine versus the like the, I don't want to say fake necessarily, but like the persona. Because I think what we talked about previously was this idea of you have to do things for the right reason in this world, right? Otherwise
Mm.
it's not as powerful or as potent. But I also like the idea that there's this conflict going on where you can do the music for the money and the fame and the whatever, but that motivation, kind of like in a weird way, like the Green Lantern Corps, how like the different colors, like you can be motivated by greed, you can be motivated by fear, and that's still really potent and powerful. But in a weird way, it's not as like genuine. And so one of those things that I wanted to talk about was the idea of industry plants, right? Where these maybe they're Daniel, your jukebox golems actually helped me with this type of idea, where the the manifestation of like fake sound essentially comes from the jukebox golems getting together and being like, all right, let's have this new sound, right? And they literally, with all of the souls inside of them, form a new band. And they're industry plants, right? Where they're trying to take advantage and get power and money by purely commercial means. It's not about the artistry. It's like, okay, what's popular? We'll try and ape that. And so that's what the jukebox golems do, is they create, and in certain cases, they might be literal plant people. Like I think something like that is dumb and fun enough in and of itself. But I the main idea that I'm interested in is genuine versus, inauthentic, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So this is like almost like in the pop music world, it would be like the pop boy bands they create to serve a marketing purpose versus a band that actually came together to create real music.
You mean
Exactly.
K-pop?
Right. Well, there's a difference between like artistry and aesthetic, right? So I think that's the major conflict that I'm interested in, is this idea of, like we can do it and be popular, or we can do it because we want to do it. And I think the 2000s boy band idea is entirely apt. And Chris, you with the K-pop reference as well. Like where it's pure industry, like none of those people are really like a creative force behind it. It's basically like a pop star factory going on.
Ooh, actually, to wind back to the legacy thing of mine, similar to K-pop or anything like that, what if it was more of things that just seem there's something off about it? Like, have you ever seen Baby Metal or like Poppy, the musical person?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's just something that's off about it. Like hearing a metal music from that, just I don't know. It's interesting. I like looking at it, but it's still alien in a way.
Mm-hmm. Well, see, that's actually a dangerous subject to kind of think about or to talk about in and of itself, because when we think about something like Poppy, right, where how authentic is it? And I suppose this yours and mine are kind of tied together in this regard,
Mhm.
where you're going to have people, and you're basically going to have music racism or music sexism, where it's like, that's not the metal I know, because, and then the gatekeeping happens, right?
Yeah.
Because it doesn't fit their uh, small subgenre mindset of what that music, quote unquote, should be, right?
Mhm.
I just think that's also an interesting topic and conflict that we can kind of talk about as well.
Like then it gets into the debate of like what is metal.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. But but again, I think that's a little bit too meta. I think I would want to stop right before we get to that point. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Yeah.
No, I think that should be more of a story point in your world where you display your worldview. of what's going on, because you shouldn't be told what you see as metal. Like I think Poppy's heavy metal album was actually pretty good.
Right. Well, and I think that's also a really good point as well. It's like what your definition of metal is could certainly be different. Like Vars Vikernes, while undoubtedly a metal musician, his idea of metal is like white supremacy. And dear God, that's not my version of metal. Like that's something that I absolutely would want to push back against, you know? Like that's an interesting conversation to have as well.
Do a lot of white supremacists at heavy metal concerts.
Yeah.
It's been a long ass time, but yeah, I remember that now.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. And now, I mean, it's punk concerts too. I mean, there's a reason that Dead Kennedys have a song called Nazi Punks Fuck Off, and it is not ironic. You know, like when genre of music is popular enough, it's bound to attract people who are, you know, assholes and fucking literal goddamn Nazis. So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think it's always important to have certain switches you can flip when you're working with a setting or a mythology that is how you flavor it for your adaptation. So so if the definition of metal is one of those switches, you know, then everything you build in the world will be tainted by that point of view, right? In a good way, right? I say tainted, but I mean like it's your adaptation. Just like, so for example, one of the switches in traditional D&D was alignment, right? So like if you turn on a switch and you're defining what good and evil is, right? So you have to make that decision as a GM. So if you're going to run a pirates campaign, well then good is actually evil for you, selfishness, right? So that's the kind of thing with metal. You can decide metal is, you know, maybe it's the weird indie metal stuff that's cool for you. Maybe it's like classic, I don't know, 70s metal. So that's what you have to decide.
Right. For some people, all metal is Iron Maiden and things that sound like Iron Maiden. Mm-hmm. You know, there is a level of fanaticism involved. So that's also a really interesting point to delve into as well.
It could even be the theme of the campaign. It could be that in your campaign there are competing definitions of metal, and that is what people are fighting about.
See, that's a really cool idea. Yeah,
you join the faction that's trying to take hold of metal,
right?
And the whole idea, the whole theme surrounding the game is like finding the true soul that is metal or rock in general. I think that's a really cool idea. Yeah. Well, I feel like we've mined to the core of this heavy metal planet, and I think it's time that we go ahead and throw in some plot hooks and figure out the best way to add some spice and adventure while fucking around with other genres. So before we get into these plot hooks, there is something I do want to bring up, and I think it's important, is that between our Battle Trains episode and this setting, Daniel told us last night, as of this recording, he said, quote, "Guys, I think I might like metal." And I just really want to take a moment and like just give a slow golf clap to that. Throw out a hail sweet Satan, because finally we have another convert. Daniel, I'm just a proud papa right now. I just want to make sure that that's known.
I mean, I have to give appropriate props to Courtney, because she sent me, what was the first band? It was something in Ardor.
Zeal
and Ardor.
Yeah, and I was like, man, I love this. And that weird like chain kind of beat to it. I was like, whoa, I didn't know metal could sound like this. And I'm like, I'm on board with that. And then I was listening to all the other ones you were sharing for the Ride the Lightning thing. I'm like, oh, okay, this is cool.
Yeah. Again, I'm glad that we can crack open your 1998 vault of music and maybe add in a couple of more options. So
yeah, I'll add those to the edge of my library of garbage songs. So like, there's room for 5 songs. There you go.
I don't care what we kicked out, but I'm glad that we made room for metal. That's all I'm going to say. Yeah. All right, so for our plot hooks today, the genre that we're going to be starting off with is going to be straight up fantasy. We already have a pretty fantastical world. So let's take a traditional fantasy trope and amp it up to 11 in this particular setting. Does anyone have any ideas surrounding a plot hook that is revolving around a fantasy world?
So I immediately thought of Tom Bombadil.
Yes.
How dare you?
How
dare you?
As one does, yes.
I mean, that's basically it. Tom Bombadil, but in this like metal setting, or
why?
or all of this in like Middle Earth, which I guess was part of the original prompt even.
Yeah.
Mm.
So Courtney, I can actually totally run with that. Like
Mm.
that's easy for me because in this world, Tom Bombadil is not some merry gentleman who's off to help hobbitses. No, he is in fact he's the equivalent of like a Pied Piper or like a walking corruption of easy listening music. He's so
Oh God.
yeah, exactly. So whereas like, you know, they're heroes and they're doing metal things, like this guy is going around handing people fresh pies, helping people with like, you know, blood wounds and whatnot. Blood wounds? I don't know what that
Blood
is.
wounds.
Yeah, as opposed to
Wait.
regular wounds.
I have a question for you, Rob.
Please.
Okay, and this touches the very cosmology of the setting.
Yes.
So if Satan is a force of nature and basically like not really bad, he's just, we say Hail Satan, so kind of he's almost like God in this realm, right? Does that mean that this Tom Bombadil corrupted character is actually a demon from their version of hell?
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah.
And is their hell like basically the Hobbit?
Wait a minute.
So this is making me think of the Bilbo
Oh,
Baggins
no.
song by Leonard Nimoy. Which if you haven't heard or watched it, I highly recommend. Just
Greatest
look up
little
Bilbo
hobbit of them all.
Baggins, Leonard Nimoy.
Okay.
I
I
it's
love
great.
this.
It's great.
I love this so much because now we can go ahead and go back to my previous hatred of Kenny G. And he is now the bastard child of Kenny G and Tom Bombadil. He's going around and instead of trying to tempt people into hailing Satan, he's the satanic panic, but
Yes.
their version of the satanic panic. Yes. Okay.
No.
So when you play his records backwards, it's actually some.
It's Psalms.
Yeah, it's something that's like, here's a recipe for cookies and brownies, kids, like something like that. And so this satanic panic is sweeping across the blackened landscape of the world of metal. And it's like, we've got to stop this Tom Bombadil character. He's got to go down. And so it is now the heroes who have to rock so hard that they can reconvert the now straight-laced, khaki-wearing children who've been afflicted by this Tom Bombadil Kenny G hybrid.
What a goddamn nightmare.
Yes, exactly. I think oh my god, I love the idea of a reverse satanic panic. That's so good. Oh my god. Okay. All right. So
You can't really top that.
That's why we're moving on to the next plot hook, because really, I recognize. I'm like, we're good. We're moving on. All right. So next up, for the next plot hook genre we're working with, Chris, Courtney, Daniel, tell me what a romantic plot hook in the land of 1,000 decibels looks like, because I am so excited to see what the fuck this is.
Romantic.
A romance plot line, yeah.
I mean, what does metal? So in my brief looking at videos, seeing some videos when I was preparing for that game, like the music videos that they make, I saw a bunch that were fantasy metal, I guess, because there's like crazy, like, I don't know, dungeon looking stuff and dragons and such. So it seems like there's, at least for some angle of metal, there's a nostalgia, or maybe like a Mary Sue-ish self-inclusion kind of fantasy of being this either hero or like badass knight demon slayer. So I think part of it is like this nostalgic wistfulness towards a fantasy, but I don't know what that translates to as a romance. But romantic with a capital R is what I'm suggesting.
Well, yes. Yeah.
To go into how we were also doing stereotypical fantasy, you could do the whole rescuing someone trapped in a tower kind of thing, because that's what I think of every time I listen to Holy Diver for some reason.
Oh my god, get out of my fucking head, Chris. Because my brain immediately went to Dio as well. Like, holy shit.
You thought I was going to reference something else.
Oh God, I hate that reference, but I'm
But it
so
was
glad that
me.
we got the Dio reference. Yes.
It's funny because I mean that metal, even though it tries to portray itself as this dark, black, like from hell kind of thing, it's got an actual pastoral to it, which is very strange to me.
Well, I think it's also there's weird roots in like kind of this misogyny to it as well, where it's mostly like a male power fantasy of slaying.
Oh, right.
demons.
That's what I mean. Power fantasy. Yeah.
Where it's like I'm gonna slay the demon and get the big breasted, like wench. She's gonna
Right.
be my, like there's that aspect to it as well.
We didn't get to know each other at all, but I killed something.
Yeah. So how can we kind of fight that? How can we maybe make this a power ballad that is like romantic and also metal at the same time? What can we do in that regard? I think this is actually tougher than it sounds.
You could kind of take it from the like ancient romance where two people who were fighting each other and dueling the duel of like souls instead become one soul because they're meant to be.
Okay, Chris, that is an excellent starting point for sure. That's a great idea. I like the idea that this isn't even necessarily soul combat, that these two warriors are so like they're fighting so hard that they're basically like destroying the landscape around them, but they've been fighting for hundreds of days, right? And so maybe there's that aspect to it as well, that this clash between these two warriors has gone on for so long that it is a walking disaster area. And maybe the idea is, okay, the heroes have to come in and stop the fighting from happening, because guess what? All this destruction, while metal, not actually helpful or metal enough, something like that.
Someone just needs to walk up to them and be like, kiss.
Oh, it also reminds me of the Ogloff comic where it's like blood and thunder, and they're just like two like super metal dudes just fucking each other raw.
Yeah.
You know the one.
Ignore them on the bridge kind of thing.
Yes.
I was about to say, like, if
You
you're
wizard!
if you're looking for a way to pervert the misogyny at the base of the whatever metal themes there might be, you might have to queer the thing, essentially.
I don't think we necessarily need to, but I think that's certainly part of it that we could do as well. And that's why I was using like specifically gender neutral terms, because those two warriors could be two dudes, could be two ladies, doesn't matter. Like the idea that they're a walking disaster is what's more interesting.
Well, so if you explore that then, and they're engaged in combat, is part of what they have to accomplish is like reverse their point of view. So like maybe what this party has to do is like swap their bodies or something. So now they have to like fight each other from different perspectives and understand who they are and why they're fighting each other.
That's actually really interesting. So normally that kind of sorcery in Conan the Barbarian is like looked down upon, right? But I love that as like an idea, right? Where it's like, hey, this is the sneaky way that we're going to do it. So if that's the case, right? If that's the solution, how do we make that happen? How do we cause that spell or like body swapping to happen?
It could be unintentional, and that's part of it. Like that's how they're soulmates or whatever.
Right, but if we're setting this up as a plot hook, right, that's the idea, is that we're setting off a tipping point, that we've reached this point in the story. Now the adventurers come across this, and it's their job to finish it, right? So how do we make it so it's their job, and what do they do in order to make this body swap happen?
They have to finish a song, like it's a half-written one.
Oh, maybe. Okay. I love where we're going with this, Chris. Maybe the two of them were bandmates and they were writing a song together.
Yeah.
And so you have to finish that song with like bits and pieces that you find from the other ones. And it's like, wow, this is actually a really devoted love song, like that's just so happens to be metal as fuck. And by finishing and performing that song, you can reconcile the two lovers and stop this walking disaster of the battle.
Yeah, that's pretty perfect.
Okay, all right. Well, again, I feel like those are good stopping points, and I think that's going to wrap it up for this episode and this series of World Build with us. Holy shit. Thank you so much, Mr. John Doe, whoever you are, for introducing the Land of 1,000 Decibels. It's been fucking metal. Hell yes. Hail
you.
Satan. Remember that if you want us to build sweet-ass worlds like this, you can always email us at worldbuildwithus@gmail.com, or you can go ahead and shoot us a tweet over at Let's Worldbuild, or just give us a follow. Alternatively, you can come join our community over on our Discord server, where we hang out, talk about world building stuff, and occasionally, I don't know, bullshit about nonsense. Or if you're feeling really generous, you can give us money over on Patreon. Links for the Discord and the Patreon in the description. And beyond that, remember that we love you very much, and we'll get through this together until next week. Hail Satan.
Hail Satan.
Hail Satan.
Oh,
Daniel.
Daniel.
you
No,
guys
it's
say-
cool. No, Daniel doesn't have to do it.
Well, okay. No, that's fine.
Daniel doesn't have
Daniel's,
to do it.
no. Daniel's
Hail-
clutching his crucifix right
Hail
now.
Bilbo Baggins. So
There we go.
Tom
we like them
Bombadil.
apples.
Tom
Yeah.
Bombadil.
Okay,
Hail,
yeah,
hail Tom Bombadil.
Glory be
I'm-
unto him. Tom Bombadil.
Yeah, that audio isolated Daniel is going to come back to haunt us.